But of course, the initiative would have to fail then. Assault suspect who was victim of prison beatdown can't sue the warden, the Pennsylvania court says. Assault suspect who was the victim of a prison beatdown says, no way. An inmate who was the victim of this beatdown in a country, they call it a country prison, not county, country, after being arrested for assaulting his girlfriend, can't sue the warden over the attack. A Commonwealth Court panel made that call recently in eviscerating the lawsuit Thor D. Perry, a frequent flyer in the criminal justice system, filed against Erie County Warden James Vescheko. Unfortunately for Perry, one of the guards at the prison when he was taken there in January 2012 was his girlfriend's uncle. Jason Worcestershire Judge Michael H. Wojcik noted in the state court's opinion in the case. So you get this now? You beat your girlfriend up, they take you to prison, and there's the girlfriend's uncle. Wonder what happened. Well, investigators says Worcestershire and another guard, Clifford Palmer, there's one for you, arranged for other prisoners to give Perry a severe beating. Worcester and Palmer were fired and later convicted of criminal charges for Perry's assault. The guards are the only remaining defendants in Perry's civil rights lawsuit. So what you have is a goon squad, and you have an absentee warden who's inept at the very least. Perry, 25, of Sangertown, took his case to Commonwealth Court. And, of course, the judge, he found no legal grounds. No, of course not. And inmates was inadequate supervision, relationship with inmates, inadequacies. The beatdown occurred when Worcestershire just happened to leave his duty station. He left it without authorization, and it's just filled with stuff. Let's get going to something else, shall we? How about Bridgeport, Connecticut? Folks, it's called Prison News for a reason. This isn't to desensitize you. This is to let you see what the heck is happening out here, good and bad. Prisoners in the front of the bus, in the back of the bus, who are ready for early release, and those who are lifers. We want you to see this so you can get a sense of what's going on and plan your life and your business challenges accordingly. Now, here's a guy that used a phone app to try to lure a 15-year-old girl, and he's in prison. It's called an online chess app. I haven't heard of this one. Federal prosecutors say an Illinois man is headed to prison for traveling to Connecticut to have sex with a 15-year-old girl he met through an online chess app. The U.S. Attorney's Office says 53-year-old Arturo Castro of Wilmette, Illinois, was sentenced Monday to 10 years behind bars. He pleaded guilty in June to use of an interstate facility to persuade a minor to engage in unlawful sexual activity. Court documents say Castro began communicating with the girl around December through a, quote, chess with friends app. Instead of playing chess, he tried to get the girl to expose herself and send naked pictures. Okay, I'll just leave that right there. BBC filmmaker left terrified after a prison interview with a psychopath, and when that interview takes an unexpected turn. Now, before we start, do you really think a BBC filmmaker, these are some rough dudes. These are the kind of guys you see in a bar who are ordering seconds and thirds just before closing time. Do you think he was terrified by meeting a psychopath in a prison? I wonder if he's trying to get a documentary ginned up or something. It'll be fun to see. Let's go ahead and see what the article has to say. Last year, Horizon's BBC longest-running science documentary, Strand, posed this particularly tricky question to myself and assistant producer, so we set off to answer it. What better way than to try and meet some psychopaths ourselves? It is virtually impossible to do this in the UK because of our criminal system, so we headed to America. And they went, where do they go? Right to the Indiana State Prison, baby. It's a frighteningly large complex that houses some of the state's most terrifying murderers, rapists, and pedophiles. Well, they can't do that in England, but hey, United States, you want to have a little one-on-one with a psychotic? Here it is. Research is clear that not all psychopaths are criminals, but with criminal versatility listed as one of the identifying personality traits, it seems like a good place to start. After months of negotiations to gain access, the day for us to meet 4 of the inmates finally arrived. Our crew and cameras were ushered through security alongside the prison officers clocking on for their daily shift. We were swept past the cell where death row inmates met their visitors. Bared metal gates swished open, and we sheepishly followed our gracious guides. We wheeled our cameras past the vast red brick buildings that contained floor after floor of these prison cells, and undoubtedly we knew we were being watched. Finally, we reached the prison interview rooms. Sparse, they contained nothing more than a couple of chairs and a security camera in one corner. Now, it was at this point that they learned the inmates they would meet in these rooms would not be shackled and merely would sit a few feet away from them. Of course, there would be a prison guard watching from outside the room at all times, but when a murderer shakes your hands, that feels like an awful long way. Our interviewees were a mixed bunch of all ages, all chosen by the prison psychiatrist as ideal candidates, but none formally diagnosed as psychopaths. Now, before I go any farther, what do you think it costs to have that prison psychiatrist go through all this stuff and glean some people and bring some people? Do you think that was money well spent for some foreigners to come in, a foreign power can come in and to have their way with these guys to do a documentary, then leave? You know, if you got problems with overcrowding and underfunding in schools and in prisons, overcrowding, underfunding in prisons, I wonder if maybe the psychiatrists could be doing some other things. In the days that followed, it was a surreal experience. We would each draw our own conclusions as to whether these men were truly psychopaths. Perhaps most frightening and intriguing of them all was a young man called Robert, aged just 17. He had tried to escape from a juvenile justice center, a facility that houses young offenders. In his bid for freedom, he assaulted an officer using their own handheld radio, leaving him so badly injured that he was permanently brain damaged. Incredibly, Robert's rap sheet was far less severe than the other men that we interviewed. Yeah, he hid his stuff. They confessed to rape, murder, necrophilia, pedophilia, amongst other things, but Robert somehow felt different. He was clean-shaven and well-presented, but extremely clever and polite. How did he end up here? He sat just a few feet, and I could have felt more frightened of him than I initially did, but his charming mannerisms sucked me in. We talked about the books he read. He was almost an encyclopedic in terms of his knowledge, his love for his grandparents, his budding military career. In hindsight, this grandiose sense of self-worth was a classic psychopathic trait. But partway through the interview, I became terrifyingly aware of just how dangerous this man really was. Robert relished in telling me of the victim. The back of your neck is the weakest spot in your body, so I hit him there. He talks about how he tried to, kill a guy by hitting him in the back of the neck. Then he claimed that he could read anybody, capable of analyzing a whole person's day by just what they were wearing and how they were sitting at the end of their day. So I volunteered for him. Go ahead and give me a character, assessment. Can you read me? Yeah, the guy says, I can read you. He says, you're a little bit on edge. He says, I'm not a threat. You've got dark pants on. You've got dark boots on. Your boots are laced all the way up tight. Your pants are of a darker color. So you start today with a firm, determined goals in your life. Your shirt sets you more at ease. It's not a hard color. To see how the day goes and see how it takes me. I'm going to do this, but we're just going to see how it goes. Anyway, this guy gives him a whole bunch of stuff here, and the guy didn't breathe. It turns out this guy was watching him like a friggin' predator, like a hawk. When he finally asked Robert if he thought he was a psychopath, Robert answered, nah, maybe. And with the American prison system unable to diagnose every inmate, we'll never know for sure. But this reporter says he thinks that he knows. Yeah, okay, well, enough of that. Now, we're going to close on some foreign news here. Now, when you have people wanting to get in world communities and help make world decisions and go to, regardless how you feel about the United Nations, they're sucking information from all kinds of people out to how to get one world orders and stuff like that. Look, I got nothing against Kenya. I like the coffee. I like the people. But in Kiberia, Kenya, the biggest slum of plastic bags everywhere, their government's off the rails. The government says they have a ban on total plastic bags. Okay, they hang off the trees, or guys leave them thrown around, but they got a deal. They're sending guys to jail or prison for 4 years for having a plastic bag. That's absolutely right. You can read it for yourself. Kenya talks about they're not the first to ban plastic bags. Rwanda tried to ban plastic bags in 2008, and they talked about issuing a regional ban. But what has been difficult and controversial, in large part because of economics, Kenya, for example, they tried to initiate a ban several times in the past decade. But the country has continued not only to consume large amounts of plastic, but produce many of the plastic products in the region. Now, the people say, hey, you can't send somebody for 4 years, man. It's going to cost a lot of money to do that. Well, some people would say it's wrong. Not only does it cost a lot of money, many people say it's just wrong to send a guy, take him away from his parents for 4 years just to even have one. One guy was selling charcoal in the middle of a slum in the plastic bag. He says, hey, man, he says it's an economic cycle all its own. He says, when I'm done with this bag, people use it to actually put human waste in and throw it away. They don't have, running water there. Most of the people that this ban is going to go after, they make less than $2 a day, and having that plastic bag makes a huge difference. We don't have a toilet. We don't have an outhouse. Sometimes we have to use called a flying toilet, which is where you put your waste and eliminate into a plastic bag, tie it, and just throw it into an area there. And he says it's not the plastic's fault. Now, the supermarkets are starting to heed the ban because they don't want to go to prison. But as you drive around, you see that not everybody is. Well, folks, we're not blaming the Kenyans, but when you people with a broken economy like that, a broken society, give a man 4 years for having a plastic bag. I mean, can you remember we had the Indianapolis 500 race here a few years ago, I think, and a plastic bag fell out of the stands, got caught up in one of the engines and of one of the competitors, and it made the engine overheat and ruined his race? Well, under this rule, just having that plastic bag on there, you could go to prison. So, speaking of prison, let's do a bullet shot. You ask a little sound effect. Just that quick, an inmate can get a weapon that's been smuggled in by either a crooked guard or a drone, or somebody throws it over, and he could kill somebody in there. However, we don't see that happening, do we? No, not yet we don't. Not yet we don't. But we do see beatdowns. We've just talked about some assaults on staff. We've talked about trick reporting and twisting of words to make something that's a bona fide riot, initially reported as a riot. Inmates on 2 different units lighting off, throwing rocks at cars, officers down, the whole thing, and making it sound like it's not a riot, just a fight. Nobody knows why. Hey, they know exactly why that fight lit off. They pay these guys. Some of these people are making 6 figures to study gang tattoos and do feasibility studies on the prison environment and all this stuff, and have snitches on the payroll. That's how they get their information. Or some guards have, as you sit and listen to these things, if you've been with us for any length of time, say more than 6 months, you know that there's a repetitive trail, if you will, a well-worn trail to inmate logic and how inmates behave behind prisons. However, as of late, prisons are not being run very good. There's, how many deaths have we reported on where a prison nurse was involved? How many lawsuits where a guy was found dead in a cell and the guards that were supposed to check him, didn't do it, or he was on suicide watch, but nobody showed up for the suicide watch. Regardless how you feel about it, if money is allocated for that prison at the legislative body, here's your money for funding, and you say part of my funding is for suicide watch, part of my funding is for full staff, part of my funding is to keep all the security cameras in good working order, and you don't do any of that, but yet a whole bunch of that money is either diverted or found to go for social causes, or maybe part of the $100,000 for the prison psychologist, psychiatrist. You got to ask yourself, how are we going to get balance back in Canada and down in the United States? And the answer is, you're not going to get balance in there. If you take a look at the way the world's going, and if you were to take just a little look at a biblical analysis that talks all about how nations go down, whether it's Greece, whether it's Romans, if you want to read that book called The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, it's a fantastic book. Used to be required reading for certain advanced studies, not anymore because it takes so long to read it. It's like reading 2 or 3 or 4 Bibles. It's a big read, very well done. But it talks about how a nation's torn down. And you can look at the United States, how it's being torn down. But it's trying to be used to usher in a one world government. And if you're curious about this one world government, why don't you get your hands on an old Bible, one that's at least 400 or 500 years old. Now, the Bible doesn't have to be that old. It can be brand new, but the text based on the old Elizabethan Queen English like Shakespeare used to write, the kind of Bible that people who got burnt at the stake staked their lives on, their spiritual life. Don't go with a Bible that's been published after World War I, that's been certain things about Jesus and his blood atonement are de-emphasized, where they try to take mail